Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to join our webinar today. First off, this webinar is being recorded. My name is Nicole and I work for SEV in Northern Italy. And today marks webinar number 3 of this series. This webinar is going to focus on cooperatives, what their challenges and opportunities are, and some more relating themes. Here is the table of content of today's webinar. First, we're going to briefly introduce BECoop. Then we're going to touch on the energy cooperatives in general. We will talk about the advantages of a cooperative and the obstacles, as well as also their importance in the energy transition to energy democracy. We will talk about our local example here in South Tyrol in Northern Italy, and we will list some best practices, local best practices. And in the second part, we will give the word to Goiener, who are going to talk about the collective self-consumption and energy initiatives. So first off, the project, what is BECoop? The vision of BECoop is to provide the necessary conditions and also the technical and other business support tools to unlock the underlying market potential of community bioenergy by allowing new links and partnerships. This webinar in particular is trying to unify the theory, so the research, the studies, the questionnaires, but also the reality. So the best practices, what has been working for years, what are also the challenges and the obstacles. So this is the main objective of today's webinar. Just quickly about the knowledge exchange platform that has been developed by this project. It is, you can find it on the web page, you can register for it, and you have a repository of knowledge, tools, and services in the field of community bioenergy heating, as well as you also have a network of interest for all the actors in the bioenergy sector. You have an e-market environment, a self-assessment tool, a toolkit. You have observatory, atlas of bioenergy community cases, and a digital space for fostering cross-regional networking, dialogue, and knowledge exchange. You can find a link in this page here, or you can also go to the homepage. And now I am happy to give the word to my colleague, to Andreas.
Yeah, hello also from my side. I'm going to present a little bit energy cooperatives, what they are. Let's say energy cooperatives are some innovative and social structures that are able to adapt energy technologies. In our case, low carbon energy technologies like district heating plant, biomass district heating plants, or hydropower plants. So an energy cooperative can also offer services abroad the normal services like producing and distribution of electricity or heat, but they can also have like a service, the optical fiber networks or many others that we see afterwards in the next slides. So let's talk about advantages and economic benefits from renewable energy cooperatives. The most important thing is that they're creating an income for the communities near the generation sites. So a really locally income for the local people, creation of local employment, also with many, in our cases, cooperatives have about, in some cases, also more than 10 employees. So it's for the rural parts here in South Tyrol, it's really an important employer. So yeah, what's other advantage, another economic benefit, that also the towns and the villages can better finance their own services because they are shareholders of the cooperative, and so they are able to reduce the costs and to get some extra income. So what are priceless benefits? Because also priceless benefits exist when we have energy cooperatives. So the most important thing is to enable the direct participation and the ownership of the members. So everyone is part of the cooperative. So it's not a company, a third company. It's my company. It's my cooperative. And we think that this is one of the most important things and one of the most priceless benefits. Um, so also, like said, the fostering of a community spirit, because it's not the company from another, it's I am part of the cooperative and it's my cooperative. So we have also some educational benefits, because when you're part of the system, you will be you will have more acceptance for renewable energies. Um, so what are, but at the other side, we have also some obstacles. But what are the obstacles for renewable energy cooperatives? At first, the organizational issues. Also, in some countries, the legal framework, um, the huge planning requirements. In some cases, also the lack of institutional and political support. We see it in the last years, also in our region, the political support was less than 20 years ago when most of our district heating plants were built. So, but now we're going, let's say, to a better way because political support rises. Then an important thing is also resources, the lack of resources. Then at the other part, also the expertise that we try to give also to the others through our BECoop project. And in some cases is also an obstacle to acceptance within the community, so that there is going to, if a cooperative will create a new plant, there has to be also the acceptance within the community. So let's talk a little bit about energy transition to energy democracy. Transition means moving from one to another. Let's say from the fossil to the renewable. Um, we want also to decentralize the market dominated by large utilities. We want a decentralized market with active citizens and prosumers. So in this case, we can operate best when we have some local cooperatives. Therefore, I want to cite Svenja Schulze, now the ex-Federal Environment Minister of Germany. The restart after the Corona shutdown must be accompanied by a restructuring of the economy and industry that is compatible with environmental and climate protection. So we think we have to go in this direction, away from from burning fossil fuels to renewable energies. Um, let's talk a little bit about the South Tyrolean example. Short introduction of SEV. The South Tyrol energy landscape would very would look very different without us. We are a competence center. We are a lobbyist. We advocate the decentralized, responsive use of renewable energy in South Tyrol. We have about 300 members. 68 of them are organized as cooperatives. At the right side, we see the landscape of South Tyrol. Every green point at the landscape is a district heating plant. So in total, we have in South Tyrol about 81 district heating plants. 78 of them are biomass district heating plants. Um, Energy cooperatives in South Tyrol have a long story, a long history. In every section or in every sector of the South Tyrolean economy exist cooperatives in agricultural, energy, and other parts. So about 20 of the 48 electricity distributors operating in South Tyrol are cooperatives. Also, 18% of the power plants are managed by cooperatives of the electricity power plants, hydropower plants. And we have on the other side also that about 45% of the biomass district heating plants in South Tyrol are operated or are organized as cooperatives. And these cooperatives are able, or this district biomass district heating plants are able um, to supply green heat or yeah, thermal energy produced by biomass to about 18,000 households. Let's go a little bit in detail for the South Tyrol example to the biomass district heating plants. Like already said, we have about 78 biomass district heating plants. Most of them are corporate operated or controlled by cooperatives. Then we have also about 13% by municipalities, then limited cooperatives, joint stock companies, general partnership, and some others. At the right side, we see some image or some photos of our member district heating plants. And now we can go in detail with the best practice examples. The first example is the Fernheizkraftwerk Toblach Innichen Cooperative. It's located in Upper Valpusteria, near to the border of Austria. To the hard facts, they have nearly 1,000 members, over 1,700 customers. Uh, they have a district heating network about uh, of about 50 kilometers. In the last years, they modernized, invested a lot, so they now have a 20 megawatt of thermal power only from the biomass boilers. They have one of the biggest organic Rankine cycle modules in Italy with potential of 1.5 megawatts, and they can produce also a lot of electricity through the biomass. Yeah, what technologies do they use? At the one side, they have the biomass, the normal biomass boilers. Then, like already said, the organic Rankine cycle module, and for the heat, also they have a flue gas condensation to use in a, let's say, in the best way, also the residual heat. Um, let's talk a little bit about also the history. Like many of our district heating plants, they founded about 20 to 30 years ago because there was strong, let's say, participation also from the political side. So it it was um, it was the right time to invest in these cases. Um, the foundation of the cooperative was in 1994, and only 1 year later, they already had finished the first heat house and a little part of the district heating net, so they already started to deliver heat in 1995. Um, Interesting about Fernheizkraftwerk Toblach is that in 2005 they opened the show corridor. It's like the first of its kind in Europe. So that also school classes can go there, can visit the heating plant, can so it's for a better understanding how the heat is produced, where comes the wood from, and how are the, let's say, the internal cycle of the district heating plant. So then in 2016 they invested, they built optic fiber network also through their whole district heating network. So every household who had district heating uh, connection was also able to get the fiber to the home. So not only fiber to the cabinet or something, but really a fiber to the home network. And 2 years ago, they built a new boiler house and they installed a new biomass boiler with about 9 megawatts uh, of thermal power. So the future, we will see, there are always so many things in planning. Uh, let's see what happens. Um, so what services do they offer to their members? At the one side, the generation and distribution of thermal energy, like already said, the fiber to the home connection through optical fiber, and the generation of the electricity. Um, then we go to a second best practice example, the Schluderns Glurns Energy Cooperative, located in Val Venosta, near to the border of Switzerland. Um, Here we have also some hard facts. They have about 900 members, 950 district heating customers. Their heating net is a little bit smaller than the other one we have seen first. They have only 38 kilometers of district heating network, and also the whole cooperative is a little bit smaller because um, it's a little municipality, let's say, in this case. Um, they have two heat houses, one in Schluderns and one really near to the border of Switzerland. And so they are able to deliver the district heating network without big losses in the heating net. About the history, they founded also in the year 2000, and also after 1 year after foundation of the cooperative, they already were able to start deliver to deliver the heat to their members. In 2008, they built the second district heating plant, and already in 2011, they began to install also a fiber optic network for all the customers, for all the members. And yeah, what is the future? I talked a little about with them. They want to modernize the existing heat plants. So let's say to optimize, to modernize the existing heat plants, and maybe also to adapt some new services, because at the moment they have the generation distribution of thermal energy, the fiber to the home, and the generation of electricity. Um, they, like we have seen before, they also use biomass boilers, organic Rankine cycle modules, but in this case they also collaborate uh, with the agricultural cooperative, and they operate the biogas combined heat and power module for them. So they are the technicians for the second cooperative. Then we go a little bit to the, let's say, cooperatives that are multi-utilities in our case. Here we have, as an example, the E-Werk Prad cooperative, also located in Val Venosta. Here we have about 1,500 members. They don't have only the district heating plants and networks, but they also have hydropower and distribution of electricity. And therefore, the history also of this cooperative is very interesting because they founded nearly 100 years ago as a hydropower and distribution cooperative, but then also around 2000 in 1999, um, they began to build district heating networks. They started with the combined heat and power plant, and then after already 3 years, they had they were on the limit of the capacity, and so they decided to construct a new second heating plant for the municipality. In 2012, they also built the optic fiber network for their members, and in this case, the future will be also in a new construction of a, let's say, of a third district heating plant, and in the modernization of the existing heat plants. Modernization, and yeah, so we have at the one side 1,500 members, with about 700 of them are directly connected to the district heating network. Their district heating network is about 28 kilometers, and the thermal power is on, let's say, the capacity of the heating net is on the limit, so they have to invest in the next years, and they have also already the plan to do that. They use biomass boilers, biogas, combined heat and power. So also they collaborate with another cooperative that produces biogas. They have also vegetable oil, combined heat and power. They also use heat pumps, and they have the hydroelectric power plants and the PV plants. So, like already said, they are one of the multi-utilities in our case, because they have the generation and distribution of electricity, generation and distribution of thermal energy, then, like we have seen in the cases before, also the fiber to the home network. But in this case, they offer also to the local people car sharing. They have a EV, an electric vehicle, and they installed also a public EV charging station. Um, Interesting in the case of Prad is that we see that the local people are really interested in renewable energies, because in Prad we find also the highest density per capita of installed PV power in Italy, with more than 2000 watts per capita of per inhabitant. Then last but not least, we have the EUM cooperative in Valpasiria, in Passaia. They were also founded like a hydropower cooperative, but they afterwards have done a takeover of a power distribution network, and also merged with the Felders cooperative. They were already uh, operating in the district heating sector. So at the one side we have the hard facts. They have about 700 members. 70 of them are district heating customers, and they are really one of the smallest district heating plants in our cases. They have only about 3 kilometers of district heating network and 1.4 megawatt of thermal energy. So they used, like already in the ongoing presentation, we have seen the biomass boilers, hydroelectric power plants, and also flue gas condensation. So also with the AUM cooperative, we have, let's say, a multi-utility, because their services are really from one, are going from A to C They have the generation distribution of energy, of electricity, generation distribution of thermal energy. They offer to their members internet via power line, not through optical fiber, but via power line. Then they also installed in every single municipality in their part of Pasaya public EV charging station. They also operate a gas station, a car workshop, and because it's in the end of a small valley, they also try to get there the local grocery shops. So they operate also the grocery shops because otherwise there won't be a grocery shop anymore because there are only a few hundred people, and in this case this is really added value for the territory, let's say. And so my part is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas. Now the word goes to Goiener.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Merveille. I work at Goiener, which is also a cooperative, but in the north of Spain, in the Basque Country. I'm trying to get the slide to move, but it's not moving.
It is. It's just a bit slow.
Just
Wait
a bit
for
slow.
it.
Okay, right. So we have been, well, we just celebrated our 10th anniversary this year. And although our vocation is also to generate renewable electricity, so we were until very recently not working with district heating or anything like that. The reason why we are in BECoop is because we are also looking into that option, but we come from the pure electricity generation and especially retail. So because of legal requirements and market situation, when we started from selling retailing electricity to our members, and we've increased our membership a lot since those first years. I'm still not getting any movement in the presentation. That means that we have now 17,000 members, and we're supplying to over 20,000 consumer contacts.
Chris, can you try again with the arrow of your
I am-
keypad? And if
I
it
am
doesn't
trying
work,
with
maybe Nicole can pass the slides then.
now it's moved.
Yes.
Oh, let's see. Right. So we are also working with a lot of new energy communities. So BECoop, we've talked a lot about bioenergy in the first part of this webinar and cooperatives, but there is also a new, since the Renewable Energy Directive in Europe, there is also a new kind of actor on the market, which is perhaps not as big as the large cooperatives like Goiener or some of the members of SEV, but something in between, which is called an energy community, and that's also part of what we are promoting at BECoop. And in this webinar, we will also try to explain what other services or what other activities these energy communities can do. And in fact, what we see is that most energy communities do not start with distributing heat, but with generating their own electricity and then self-consuming it. Self-consumption is different to retail because you do not use most of the distribution grid. And this was made possible since the Renewable Energies Directive that I've highlighted here. And there are two definitions in the directive which are important. One is renewable self-consumer. This means a final customer who generates some of its own renewable electricity, usually through photovoltaic, because that technology has taken off tremendously in the last 15, 20 years. It's become a lot more cheaper in the last 10 years, especially. So that means that individual people can easily invest in this technology and get a good return. And what they can do with that energy is store it or even sell this self-generated renewable energy, as well as consume it themselves, of course. But since a lot of people do not live in individual houses where they can put photovoltaic panels on the roofs of their houses, but they live in building blocks, there is a second definition, and this is the one called jointly acting renewable self-consumers. And this means that at least two of the people who are defined as renewable self-consumers are located in the same building and then can exchange or share the generated electricity and self-consume it. So this is thought of primarily for a multi-apartment block, but the directive leaves the possibility of the member state to decide whether you can also do it within other premises. And fortunately, a lot of member states have taken this option and have been regulating this aspect. So when EU directive talks about jointly acting renewable self-consumers, we are seeing that as a synonym for collective self-consumption. So I'm moving to the next slide, and let's see whether that right. Okay, there we go. So I would say, as we've seen from Andreas's presentation, a lot of the cooperatives in the past have mainly focused on generation of renewable energy, either through hydro or through wind power, or then more recently also photovoltaic, and then selling it to their consumers. But now we see that this model has become under pressure, especially because the larger renewables installations no longer benefit from the feed-in tariffs that were on offer, that they have to participate in auctions, and that is much more difficult for citizen initiatives to participate in these auctions. So the option of collective self-consumption has been taken on by many cooperatives, or especially the smaller energy communities, as a new business model. Yet we would like to emphasize that an energy community is definitely not, it's not necessary to do collective self-consumption, or if you want to do self-consumption, it's not necessary to form an energy community. There's nothing in the Renewable Energy Directive that says that energy community it has to be related to collective self-consumption. In fact, in Spain and in many other countries, it is just the only thing that's necessary is that there is an agreement on how you will distribute the collectively generated electricity between the different consumers. Then how does it work in practice? Well, the collective self-consumption can be either directly, this means through a local grid, in particular if all the consumers are living in the same building block. So that means that you do not distribute this energy outside of your building block. It stays within the building block. Or if the consumers are a bit more spread out, then it is understood that they are still localized, so that it is a reasonably small community. How small, that depends on the regulation in each country, but that means that they do use some section of the public grid, and that is then often called virtual collective self-consumption, because there is, like I said, there is a part of the public grid that is being used, and you don't know exactly that the electrons that you're generating are actually the electrons that come from your plant, or the ones that you're consuming come from your plant, or whether they come from a different plant. It is important to note that the collective self-consumption participants should be able to freely choose which other retailer they use. That is to say, most plants for collective self-consumption do not serve all the energy needs of the consumers. So the balance, the remainder, you need to contract that somewhere else, and it should be able to do this freely because the market needs to remain free in that respect. When we then move to the benefits, why would you want to do collective self-consumption? Well, the main reason being is that self-produced energy is usually cheaper and quite a lot cheaper than what you buy from the net. So the prices offered by retailers in general are higher than the part that you can self-produce and self-consume. That's at an individual level, but why collectively then? Well, because if you look at it collectively, there are efficiency gains. Not only are larger plants cheaper on average per kilowatt installed, sorry, but also you can increase the overall self-consumption rate. You don't need to install as much power and you can consume more. Why is that? Well, I've tried to illustrate that here on the right with these 4 examples. So these are 4 different houses and they all have a different consumption pattern. Not all of them consume during daylight time, but if you were to sum these 4 consumption profiles, then you would see that you would actually get a far higher consumption during the daylight hours, so when there is largest photovoltaic generation potential. So that means that if everyone were to install photovoltaic on their own roof, then they might have to install 2 or 3 kilowatts per house. Yet if you put 4 houses and they all consume together, then they wouldn't have to do 4 times 3 kilowatts. It would probably be enough with 8 or 9, maybe 10. And they would actually increase the overall self-consumption rate. And this would obviously give economic benefits to all the participants. And that's the main reason for going to select collective self-consumption. Now, the next question is, yes, but isn't that very selfish? Doesn't that mean that you are, as a self-consumer, you are actually saying, well, I'm not doing what the others are doing. I'm only using the system for a little bit. Well, actually, it turns out that in many cases, the energy system itself can benefit, because it means that if people are installing their own power, there has to be less centralized power installed. Also, the distribution network itself has to cope with fewer capacity, because you're not moving so much energy around from big centralized power plants to the local consumers. So therefore, fewer investments in capacity of the network. And another aspect is, because the energy isn't transported over large distances, there are fewer transport losses. So all of this adds up to that. In general, there is a benefit to the system. And to compensate, to actually incentivize this, in most countries, the grid charges are dropped for the energy that you self-consume. So even in the virtual case, when you actually do use a little bit of the public grid, the grid charges are dropped or strongly reduced. Now, in each country, you will have to look into what the local regulation is, because this is not the case for each country. Then there's another aspect, that is that your regional distribution service operator should actually facilitate the process and provide the data for the billing. I've mentioned before that every self-consumer should be allowed to choose its own retailer. So therefore, no single organization has all the data for doing the billing except from the DSO. So the role of the DSO is actually a key, and unfortunately, not in all member states are the DSOs very willing to play that role and to facilitate this. Then maybe one final thing I would like to mention is that each country has also interpreted differently how the spatial and the temporal boundaries are for this collective self-consumption. The case I know best is in Spain. And there the rule is that all the collective self-consuming participants should be connected to the same low voltage transformer substation, or they should be located in a 2-kilometer radius of the renewable energy plant. So it used to be only 500 meters when the first regulation came a couple of years ago, but quite quickly this has been extended to 2 kilometers. But it's still important to know, and this 2 kilometers is an easier criterion to handle than whether you're connected to the same transformer substation, because the maps of who is connected to which transformer substation are usually not publicly known or publicly available. So we're actually happy that this has been extended to 2 kilometers. And the other aspect is how often you look at what the balance is between what a consumer generates and what a consumer self-consumes. In Spain, this is at an hourly rate, so would be called hourly net metering, and there are distribution coefficient for each participant in the scheme for every hour of the year. So these are almost 8,000 different coefficients that each individual consumer has to select at the beginning of the year. And this is useful because it means that, for example, in the weekend, if you're at home during the weekend, you will consume more. If you're out of the home during weekdays, then you will consume less. So you can actually arrange that within your community, who has how much of the consumes how much of the generated electricity at each moment of the day and week and year, really. And if there's an excess of energy, so when the collective self-consumers do not consume as much as what is generated by the collected plant, that's injected into the grid. And it's actually the retailer that will then compensate you on your monthly invoice for what you have injected into the grid. And I've again underlined here, it's not required to form a legal entity. So an energy community is not necessary, yet many opt to do so. I've also highlighted here, anticipating that there could be participants from Italy. And as far as I understand, the requirements in terms of spatial and temporal boundaries are similar. I'm not sure whether it's 2 kilometers, it might be a little bit less, but I've heard it's also connected to the same transformer substation as a geographical limitation. And I know the compensation scheme is slightly different. There is a sort of national clearinghouse which does the compensation. So it's not on your monthly bill, but the GSC, I think they're called, they give a compensation. Plus there is a monetary incentive scheme, because as far as I understand, in Italy, the grid charges are not dropped if you're doing virtual self-consumption. But to compensate for this, there is some incentive that's given, an extra, well, monetary compensation, yeah. And of course, there's no time here. I don't know what the regulations are in all the member states. I know in France, for example, the radius is much higher. It depends on the population density, and it can go as far as, I think, 20 kilometers, not sure. But there are online resources where you can find this. Either the Compile project has done some reporting on this, but those reports are about 2 years old. So it's probably best to look at your national Renewable Energy Directive transposition and regulation there, and look at what the possibilities are in your country. So that's as far as or what I wanted to explain about collective self-consumption as an additional service or an additional activity for energy communities. I will also briefly look into other collective actions that we can do, which are, you can call them solidarity actions, and especially to reduce energy poverty. So because the primary objective of energy communities is not to have a financial benefit, but to have economic and social benefits, this is something that we heavily promote. The fact that there are mechanisms that will allow for people with low income or low possibilities to actually access and purchase energy at fair prices, that they can participate in the decision making, and that these governance principles are transparent and clear and lead to fair decisions for everyone. I've already mentioned, so the conditions are so that the well-being is preferred over profit making, and also that there are mechanisms of knowledge sharing, intercooperation, so where different communities can actually learn from each other and do not have to make the same mistakes. Of course, these communities need to be sustainable, both in terms of environmental benefits and in terms of social aspects. So work towards the cohesion of the territory and of the people who live there. Reinforce the social fabric of your community. That's another aspect of energy communities. And as Andreas has already mentioned, of course, you help the local economy. You want to strengthen the local economy, especially for the citizens who live there, by the citizens who live there. And it increases the financial autonomy of the region. So if you have to import less fossil fuels into your region or import less even energy that's generated elsewhere, it means that you don't have to that there's fewer of the economic resources of your region that will go elsewhere. So therefore, it is also something that strengthens the local economy. I'm moving to the next slide. It's going slowly again. Yeah, some examples. So what can we do to fight energy poverty? One easy thing is to actually, I've mentioned before that sometimes your plant will generate more than you can self-consume. Well, rather than selling this to the grid, you can actually share this with vulnerable consumers so that they have very cheap energy prices and that they can reduce their bills. You can also make it easier for them to participate in these schemes by giving them also part of the ownership of the community, but with lower upfront cost, because obviously vulnerable consumers will not have the financial means to invest in renewable plants. So the community could decide or should decide really to give other means of participating by these vulnerable consumers without having to invest at the beginning. And the third means is, of course, if your cooperative runs a small profit, which is what is to be hoped, because otherwise you would have a loss. Although the objective is not to make profit or to maximize profit, it is beneficial to have a small profit. That profit can also be destined at reducing the problems of vulnerable consumers or people at risk of energy poverty. So these are just a number of things that you can do as an energy community to show solidarity with people who are worse off than ourselves. And now finally we'll look at some examples. Again, well, I think I only have time for one example so that we have time to take some questions. But this is the example in France. Les Amis de ENERCOP, they estimate that there are it says here 12 million people in France suffering from energy poverty. Sounds like a big number. So they've created a non-profit association, and what they do is through micro donations help vulnerable consumers. So if on your monthly energy bill, what they do is round up or ask people to give an extra donation, and that can then be redistributed. So far, 2,500 of the members of ENERCOP are donating each 36 euro per year on average, which gives 90,000 euros that can be collected annually and is then distributed to associations that help citizens to renovate their homes and thereby reduce their energy bills. I've got one more slide if it wants to show. Here we go. So this shows a little bit this mechanism. ENERCOP is the energy cooperative. From its bills, a part of it goes to Énergie Solidaire, which is the association that helps microfinancing, and they have three different income streams. One is what I mentioned, the micro donations on the energy bills. Then people are just other forms are just donating money, and or donating money is here, or you can also donate energy, as I mentioned. So your surplus energy generated by your local plant could be given, and all of that goes into the big pot of Energie Solidaire, and they use that to do projects to reduce fuel poverty. And that's as far as, well, I don't think I have time to go into this case study, so we'll skip it. And I think we can just go to the questions. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Chris, for your part and also the links to the Italian examples. Are there any questions?
Well,
Okay.
am I allowed a question to Andreas?
Of course.
Yeah, I noticed that in Toblach, I think I wrote down 950 members, yet 1,700 customers. Does that mean that you do not have to be a member to consume from the district heat network in Toblach?
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to be a member. And in some cases, like municipalities don't want to be or also cannot be part of a cooperative. So for these cases, it's a other tariff, let's say a tariff a little bit higher for the heat, but it's no problem to deliver the heat also to non-members, let's say in this case. And for Toblach is also the thing, we have the 900 members and about 1,700 district heating connection points. So some of the members have also more than one connection to the district heating network. So if they have 2 or 3, let's say, apartments, so in this case they have also more than one connection per member.
Yeah, I understand. We have a similar situation. So we have 17,000 members and about 20,000 connection points, and this is because some people have more than one connection point. Some may have their office or a small business, or you're also allowed to invite your parents, because we have allowed a small mechanism, but in general, all consumers in the case of Goiener need to be linked to a membership. So yeah.
Maybe it would be also interesting to know a fact about Fernheizkraftwerk Toblach Innichen. One of their major success cases is that they have, since the foundation, they have an unchanged heat price. So since 1994, they never changed the heat price, except last year, because last year they were able to reduce the heat price through the additional income from the electricity sales. So for the electricity, they get more money, and therefore they were able to reduce the district heating, the heat price.
Wow, that's really amazing, because I've heard that most other district heating plants had to increase their prices because the electricity prices have increased. But of course, since Toblach generates its own electricity, they had a surplus. So yeah, that's a very good synergy as well, since we're talking about synergies here. So yes, that's interesting.